Welcome to Outta Survival with Julia. I am Julia, and today is going to be one of the hardest chapters in my life because, disclaimer before I get into it, I am not trying to convince anybody. I am not trying to um, elaborate anything. What has happened to me, and only me and God would know that. But to share this story with you guys of manipulation and mind control, but we're not going to get too deep into the mind control. I'm going to save that for later. But, manipulation is just as bad. So let's get into it. For me, you look at all of these esoteric things, and being Vietnamese, I really looked up to my grandmother, and that's how I learned how to do the incense and really understand it. And a second person that I would always go to was my dad. And you know if you go to my other videos, you'd understand why that was a little hesitant. But when someone is supposed to be your everything, when you're a little girl, you look up to your father, the guidance of. And from a young age, he has manipulated me into not thinking for myself. It was one of those, yeah, and I'm not making fun of my own culture, but he took the culture and enslaved me every time I went to go visit him, not knowing what was going on. Would I have done that with my free will? No. That's why I know something was up. You start learning your instincts, you start learning your intuition, which is your gift. You start learning, or you just start seeing patterns of, hold on, when I was little, or why does he always act funny during this, that, or even the topics of being a young woman. I remember being like, Dad, do I use this pad or this pad? Because my mom wasn't, they were separated. So I asked some questions like that. And if you do get deep into the whole esoteric and things like that, but on the negative side, you would understand where I'm coming with the it is stupidity of not helping your daughter with her periods, her menstruals, and acting like you don't know nothing. But you had me. Like, my whole thing is my mom even told me he raised her at 16, right? So that tells you something right there. But I would think he would have more insight and more guidance than he did. But in true Julia form, people pleasing at this time, I honestly would give him the benefit of the doubt that he was a man. I'd be like, okay, I haven't seen this man since I was little. Let's say it starts there. And now he's around. Why? And manipulation doesn't have to start with, ooh, we're going to light a candle or whatever the case is, because there is the negative effects. I use white candles. I purify. You use it for what you want to use it for, and mine is all for the Most High. Now, manipulation and control could damage the way you think, you speak, what you internalize, what's real. I've talked about the mirror effect a lot, and my dad had it. He had me on, I don't want to give him that much credit, but for me to really not understand the naive part of me, I I just assumed he was a great father, and I don't know why. Again, assumptions, you know. And it's not until later, 2021. Yes, so this has been in my life since I was little. There's going to be people that doubt me. I understand that. But this is my experience. And only I can tell you what I've been through. You know what I mean? Somebody could blah, blah, whatever. But mine is the truth. So let that be known for the people that love to just spy on me a little bit still. But like honestly, I forgive everyone. Um, but what I can do for my community is speak on it. Some people that like you see it all the time as celebrities. They're running down the street naked. Oh, we don't know why. What if somebody poisoned them in their favorite grandma's food? What if someone manipulated the way they thought on alcohol, on pills, on anything, right? And you hear about celebrities always dosing up or drinking or partying. So imagine the effects of manipulating through esoteric things, meaning, sacrifices in beliefs of, things like that with the candles. And I was a very naive person. Like when I heard about love spells, I was like, no way. And that right there really had me in a bind, because the more you don't believe in these things, or at least have an open mind, how are you going to fight back? That's like going into war with not really knowing how to use your gun. You have to learn how to use your discernment, which this situation gave me. You have to learn your instinct, which this situation made me. And then you have to use your intuition, which saved me. Um, we'll talk about the the creepy things later, because I was going to save this for a um, spooky Halloween thing. But honestly, the spooky is spooky. It is what it is, right? But to manipulate and control, to me, that's a whole different topic, and that's why we're here. um when you are a young child, right, there's easy ways to get manipulated, right? You get your favorite cartoon that's like 1, 2, 3, and then what does the kid say? 1, 2, 3. For me, it was like this man, my dad, was always watching me. And I really thought it was because he's a dad, right? But he would emulate everything I would do once I got older. And I was like, he is the perfect father. Like, why did my mom leave? Like, their DV flew out my mind. When he pissed me off at 16, I didn't remember. When he used to like, I'm older at this point, I'm like this, and he's still trying to like wrestle me like I'm a little kid, which felt awkward. I was like, Dad, are you done? you know um you start thinking like, that's not the dad I remember. Like you start being like, I feel like it's God being like, hey, do you know? And my grandma being like, Because, I did develop intuition. I did start going down the spiritual path because I felt forced. Now, if I hadn't went through the manipulation and the control, would I have been spiritual? Probably not as so into it and every day about it, because it saved my life. If water saves your life, you're always going to drink water, right? So like that's just something that I love my pearls, I love my tiger eyes. It's very relaxing, something that I thought when I was little, my daddy is going to teach me that, because I would always see the incense. And I recall this one time, they thought I was a very intelligent kid. They thought I didn't know Vietnamese, which I didn't. I don't know how to speak it, but I understand it, and they think they think I was just sitting there listening to everything and that's how I know things. No, God put me in a position to survive. That's why I was sick for a year. Well, 7 months. To me, that's still a year because recovery. But that's what got me in the sickness and having to fend for myself, was, why am I sick? But then I'm getting like downloads and things like that of, you're not sick. My grandma had just passed. And that's another thing. Manipulation goes into who loves her, who would save her. And that kind of gets me in a position where I'm like, how did my grandmother and my grandfather die in a consecutive year in the same position, and they didn't live with each other? And my dad flies out there all the time, But in these situations, I feel like there's entities that we need to fight off, that you need to pray off. If you're into Bible, there's Psalms that you could read and protect yourself. And there's also, in Hebrews text, look it up. There's a lot of protection out there. As much as there's bad, there's more good, There's God, so just pray, if anything. For me to get out of his hold was praying. I would, in my head, because they're playing with esoteric at this point, and they're in my head. I'm visiting him in 2021, and this is the part that a lot of people don't know. Like, why did she change? Why is she on this podcast? No. Or why does she keep on talking about a sickness that we don't know about? Because I kind of have to put all the puzzle pieces together, let alone in real time. When I was in bed, I felt like God was giving me hints and memory, because I felt like my memory was taken. Now I can remember myself as a kid and being like, you're going to get in trouble at like 2 or 3 years old, not knowing what they were doing. They, like, again, I said, they knew I didn't speak Vietnamese. So they would talk Vietnamese in front of me to where I understood what was kind of going on in their minds, but I thought it was a joke, right? So like they would say, and it's a saying, but when someone's honest about it, you could feel it. I remember my dad saying when I was a little kid, "Chep Maya," which is like, you're gonna die. Like, honestly, but like he's throwing me, so I'm like, ha ha. But in my head, I'm like, okay. And then, I think once he noticed I was trying to like figure out what he was like meaning, he was like, go do the incense, and that's to our ancestors. So I was always manipulated by my own spiritual calling of my ancestors, my grandmothers that passed, because surviving is easier than asking questions. So ask those questions. Have permission too. We always look for validation. Know that you have permission to ask the questions. Um, that's when you go within and you find your gifts and what can help you survive and navigate through this world. If you resonate with this conversation, or you may know somebody that is going through something related, send this to them. Let them know we hear and see you. I know it's a tough topic because you either believe it or you don't. But I feel like there's going to be way more people believing it and seeing it for themselves than ever before. So don't ever think you're alone. I hope this episode gave you more clarity, vision, and hope that we can make it, that we will keep on proceeding and keeping our communities big. I am Julia, and this is Outta Survival.